Welcome to the How I Started Career Stories podcast, where we will interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, and company leaders to hear how they got to where they are on their career journey. We'll talk about the early days, the setbacks, the risks they took, and ultimately how they're using their learnings now and into the future. I'm Andrew Kappel, your host. Let's get started with this week's episode. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the How I Started podcast. Excited to bring on Barry Rhein today. And this is a really interesting backstory. So the prior podcast I hosted, How the Deal Was Done, we had a big episode filmed at the home of Rob DeSantis, where I live in Rhode Island. And that was an incredible episode that we filmed in the summer of 2024. And I'll put the link to that full episode. It was on YouTube, and really great learnings of an amazing salesperson, leader, entrepreneur, investor, board member, and you know, so many more things that Rob has done. And a couple times throughout that episode, Rob attributed the learnings that he picked up through Barry's sales, selling through curiosity, training, and leadership programs. And so that, you know, it piqued my interest. And as we launched the new How I Started podcast, you know, immediately Barry was on the short list. And so I'm not going to spoil his introduction any further, but I am curious, Barry, how did you wind up at the Stanford School of Business? I don't think you have a degree, so I'm curious to hear that story.
Yeah, being on faculty in the business school at Stanford with no four-year degree that's a great part of the story. So where would you like to begin, Andrew?
Let's so we like to split it into the early days, some of the key transition moments or periods in your career, and then we'll wrap up with what you're up to nowadays, maybe some of the learnings that you've applied from the earlier days to what you're excited about in 2025 and beyond.
No, that's totally great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Rob spoke very highly of you, and Rob, we go way back. And I remember my first meeting with Rob and asking questions and interviewing and visiting. And he's like, how did you learn to ask all those questions? Those are amazing questions. And that started our 30-year run together. So it's been quite the process. So I guess I think we can just go back in time, and you said, let's kind of go to the early years. I was blessed that I had a dad that was all about, if you become an expert and dedicate the time to learn, the answer is always yes. And so that was really cool. And I was always this curious kid. And so at 12 years old, I wanted a job. So I went to the shoe store around the corner, and every single day after school, I went by and said, hey, do you have a job? Do you have a job? And finally, after a few weeks, they said, here's the deal. You can come clean on Saturdays, but you have to promise us you're not going to come any other day. We don't want to see you anymore. You can clean, but only one. And I was like, okay. So I learned this idea of hanging in there and drive and determination early on. I loved fishing as a kid. And so I needed worms. Well, my entrepreneur spirit went, hey, if I can grow worms, I can sell worms. So I sold worms at 12 years old. In fishing. And I just started working on my way up through life and just always being curious. And my dad was super supportive. I was interested in raising bees. I had a beehive. Everybody wants a monkey as a kid. I had a monkey as a kid, an Asian macaque from the Philippines. and so I had this interesting journey, and I learned to train dogs. And that was the very first time I learned something that I think is fascinating about human beings. And that is, in the day, I could train a dog 2 days. Off leash, hand signals, 2 days. If I took that dog and handed it back to the owner, it took them 12 weeks of in-home training to learn how to get the dog to do what it already knew how to do. That started my fascination with people, training, dynamics, learning about them, belief and behavioral change work. And so I did dog training. And then I had my first career, I always wanted to be a police officer. And so I went to West Valley Junior College, and I became a police officer. It was a fun job. It was a terrible career for me. So after a year, fun job, I quit and I became a reserve. And I actually had a 36-year run with the San Jose Police Department, of which about 27 years were in special operations. And as a volunteer, that's a whole nother conversation. But what do you do when you have when you don't have a degree? and you now change careers. The only thing that I could think about was sales. And so that's what got me into sales. And when I teach at Stanford, the reason people take our course, and it's a course I wrote called The Fundamentals of Effective Selling, and it's offered to our second-year MBA students. And what's always fascinating is sales is so crucial to everybody. And even though I have many of my students are never going to go into traditional sales, they are there because they know the non-traditional application of sales is crucial to every single person. Everybody listening to this, you're going to have to sell yourself. You're going to have to sell an idea. You're going to have to pitch yourself for a position. So we teach these non-traditional sales motions in the business school. Around raising money might be a non-traditional sales motion, and on and on and on. And so, but I got into sales and I did really well. I got into sales management, and then I got fired. I got fired for insubordination. Then I drove up to San Bruno in the Bay Area, and I met with the CEO. I got my job back. And I went for a while, and then I got fired again. And I went for a while, and I got fired again. I kept getting my job back because, and it was insubordination, meaning I always thought, well, why would we not try a different way? What if we could serve our customers? What if our salespeople could be more effectively trained? And I started training them and working with them. But my manager was like, no, we don't do it that way. And I was like, well, but if it's serving the customer, why would we not? And her answer was, because I told you so. And I was like, it didn't work with my parents. It didn't work with her. And so we had this power struggle, which I learned about politics. And then I finally, after the fourth time getting fired, went, I'm done. And I decided to start a job and start a career. And that was in sales training. And my proposition was this. I had an interesting value proposition. I was young, no experience, not educated. So what was the it I was selling? And I learned to sell a dream, a vision. I would go meet with founders, president, partner, or owners of small companies because I could get them on the phone. Yeah. There's no way a nobody's going to get the AT&T CEO is not taking my call, right? And so it was cool because I started with the white pages, which is where the businesses were advertised. And I started with A's, and I got as far as ABSCO. And it was a company called Absco, furniture company. And they were in the process of going out of business. And I said, but what if I could save you? And they go, come on in. and so that was my very first client. And I did the evaluation for free. I learned their company for free. I did all that. And it was really cool because I then said, well, I'll provide the training. And my value proposition was simple. I'll provide the training. I'll do the evaluation on my dime. If you get the results you want, you pay me. If you like me, you pay me. If you don't get the results you don't like me, don't pay me. And that's how I started my business 39 years ago. So I'm in my 39th year.
Wow.
And so that was kind of getting into the game. And it's been a wonderful selling through curiosity came to be. We expanded through curiosity, which was managing through curiosity, coaching through curiosity, leading through curiosity, recruiting through curiosity, interviewing through curiosity. So if you're someone and you want to get a job, you are running a sales motion, and you have to have that person draw the conclusion you're their ideal candidate. That is a sales motion. And so that's how we think about this game of selling in non-traditional. And life was good. I was very blessed. I wound up making two gentlemen very, very wealthy because we sold their company. Rob knows one of them. He was actually at that company, and we sold it, and it was a great exit. Rob made a lot of money, and that started his journey. I mean, he was already successful before that. That was just a liquidation event, if you will. Yeah. And that CEO became a venture capitalist. I did training for another CEO that became
the portfolio.
Yeah. And we wound up with for me, these two gentlemen would send me into businesses and I would do training, and it worked out really well. I did money at first, and then I stopped taking money and I started doing equity. Yeah. I would work for free. And so this idea of how do you get results? How do you get people to change their beliefs and behaviors? How do you get people to have a dream, but develop the skills and confidence to accomplish that dream? That is magic. Lots of people have a dream. Yeah. But how do you get them the skills and confidence to be able to achieve that? That's the blessed place I've been able to play in my world. And so those are some early days, and let me stop and check in with you.
Yeah, so the non-traditional selling and the MBAs at Stanford, they're about to get an amazing credential, and they're still learning this sales program. And I think that's an interesting observation, is that everything is sales. If you're at a big company, you need to sell your initiative or your project to get it funded, to get a resource. If you're at a small company, you have to make sales to keep the lights on. And you're in recruiting, you're selling yourself for a job, at home, dating and things like that. Um, so you wound up at Stanford? Was it through some of the portfolio of successful businesses that you were training and guiding them and helping connect the vision to the outcomes? And then you got asked.
It's actually a great question.
Yeah.
I was asked, we've been very blessed. Silicon Valley has been very kind to my family,
Yeah.
and myself. And so we did a big sales transformation at Salesforce.com. We did some big things at HP that still today stand as some of the most successful programs. And I got a call from and in fact, I think you're speaking at the Entrepreneur Club today.
Yeah.
At Stanford, they have an Entrepreneur Club.
Yeah.
And I got a call from the leader of that and said, I was referred to you by Salesforce.com. I've heard some amazing stories about you. Would you be willing to come speak here at Stanford, at the business school? I was like, of course. And I'd always thought about aligning myself with a school. Stanford was beyond my wildest dreams. Trust me. I went to West Valley Junior College.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to do a speak to the club, and I did. We did a 3-hour. And then from that, people started asking, well, could you teach us additional skills? This is what we're looking for. And so I just kind of did a quick test on how many of you would be interested in a sales skills program? And everybody raised their hand. And I thought, but no one here really is going into sales. Right. So that was my first journey. And so I did my first program at Stanford on Wednesdays because there's no class on Wednesdays. And it was all volunteer through the Entrepreneur Club, and they just started a sales club.
Yeah.
And we had almost 100 people show up on that first event, which was huge. And then it was multiple weeks, and then people got busy. And so the question then became, students didn't want to commit that kind of time without credit, but they loved the course. So I reached out to a buddy of mine. I mentioned there was 2 gentlemen that I made that became very wealthy because of our training. He had been to the business school, and he hooked me up with the ex-dean, and I went and pitched my vision. And the vision was, we have the smartest kids on the planet. If you believe that's Forbes magazine says Stanford's #1. So no disrespect to anybody that's going to any other business school.
Yeah.
And so we have these brilliant kids. What happens when we teach tomorrow's leaders how to be effective, how to be curious, how to drive selling motions, how to develop skills and confidence to create their dreams? And for those that are CEO and founders of small startup companies, you have to sell other people to come to work for you for a little bit of money and a lot of worthless stock. That is sales. And so I pitched the vision, and he went, great. I love the idea. What's your background? When he found out I never went to college, he kind of went, okay, do you mind having a babysitter for a few years? And I'm like, love it. What is that? And he goes, look, I need to partner you with a professor here because we need to make sure that you offer value. And I'm like, I get it. I love that. So I met a gentleman named Jim Lattin who just retired a few months ago. So we were together 12 years, and he was there over 30. And we created this class, and it was based on selling through curiosity. And what was magical is our students taught us how to teach in a way that was meaningful to them. They taught us what the different sales motions were important to them, where their insecurities lie, what skills or where they're uncomfortable in that process, where their brilliance lies, but what's really missing in their ability to create an ideal future for them as leaders or in industry development, whatever they're actually going to be doing. And so we taught it different ways, and then we were able to finally go to what was called the compressed class, which is we run 6 3-hour sessions over the course of 3 weeks. And on the last session, because we build rapport with the students, and it's very experiential. We are not a typical GSP class. We are about role play, practice. Your homework assignments are taking conversations and applying them. So we're very hands-on. I don't believe that, I don't want to be disrespectful or sound disrespectful. Academia has its purpose. changing people's beliefs, behaviors, giving them confidence to go do things that are way outside their comfort zone. You don't learn that in academia. That's a different mindset, and it's a very different skill set. And that was the beauty of Jim and I working together, is that he brought the academia, I brought the practical application. And when you put them together, students could learn things in class and role play and practice and draw the conclusion, wow, this is way harder than I thought. If you think going in and talking to a CEO and pitching them on creating a new employment position in the company for you, that is not an easy thing to do. There is a lot of emotion there. And so we actually work with that. And then and what's great is on our last session, we do an entire 3 hours devoted to overcoming limiting beliefs. Because, I always start my class at Stanford with, what if it turned out you were in your own way and you didn't know it? What's the consequence of literally being the problem, the cog in the wheel, the wall that's in the way of your success, and you're not even knowing that? So we spend a lot of time in that. And I think that for young people, let me rephrase that. For everybody, our own limiting beliefs is what stops us being able to realize our greatness for ourselves and our families. And that's the area that gets me fired up and excited.
Yeah, yeah. I love that practical application. So this afternoon at University of Connecticut in the School of Business, Professor David Noble, he entrepreneurial background. Actually, he was a lawyer, did some fundraising or university development. So he worked with a wealthy entrepreneur who, talked about the pipeline of graduates to entrepreneurship. It was a broken bridge, or the bridge didn't exist. So they created an entrepreneurship program, and within the university class, the students actually create a business in the semester. It's a lot of e-commerce, and so they have competition. There's a sales leaderboard. They do marketing, and so we're training them on some of the HubSpot CRM system best practices, and we have a 30-minute workshop. So we're going to spin that up this afternoon. But I wish that was around when I graduated over a decade ago, and so it's nice to it's nice to come back, and I think to have that like risk. Hey, you have to your grade is how your business does, and to align those incentives. So it's really interesting to hear that, and it is fun to go back and to connect the practical application. So Barry, I'm curious. So you've been doing this for over 30 years. 39 years. So
and I don't even look that old.
Yeah, I was going to say you're about 40. You started early, right? Okay.
Rob said yeah.
Okay, so you're the phases of the training. You were starting out working for going out of business, furniture business, doing turnarounds and then accelerated growth. I'm guessing you've trained in a conference room and you've also trained in an auditorium. Are you doing virtual trainings now? You're doing class trainings now. Like what is the delivery mechanism, and does that matter? Like are people still able to get the transformational outcomes in their beliefs and behaviors from no matter what, or are you seeing that differently depending on?
So it's a really great question, and it was a fascinating question. So I did my first retirement, and it really wasn't a real retirement because I couldn't afford. But I did my first early retirement in 2000. I wanted to finish raising my family, which we did, and we have 3 amazing kids. And my daughter is now a business partner. So in our new program, Dating Through Curiosity, which if you look at all the years of our experience, the ultimate sale is truly finding the person of your dreams. It is the ultimate sale, meaning, and when I say sale, I mean a very positive. How do you find commonality? How do you connect authentically? How do you look at their strengths and weaknesses, your strengths and weaknesses, and how do you negotiate that process? Those are all true sales skill sets. And so I've always had this vision of dating through curiosity, parenting through curiosity, but it's really more in the B2C play as opposed to the B2B. And so 4 years ago, my daughter Joey came on board. And so she helped us with our big program that we just finished with Transamerica Life Insurance Company, World Financial Group, where we were able to train hundreds of thousands of people at scale. And so to answer your question, we cracked a code that I'm really proud of. I did my retirement. I decided to come back, and my vision was, how do you make a difference to 1 million people? I could do it in the old traditional, let's fly everybody in, 3-day workshop, 4-day workshop, 5-day workshop, whatever it was. But we flew everybody in, and then they went through and we put people in round tables of 6 or 8 or 10, and we moved people around. And so they had that experience. It was immersion training, and it was all for a company. So they all had the common messaging. They all knew the common objection handling flip chart. They had the common qualification. So all the sales tools were all designed, customized for the company. And then we practice it, and we practice it enough that people actually changed their behaviors and were more comfortable. And by doing so, they would go out, and we comfortably and confidently and regularly did things like increasing closing rates 40% and doubling the ASP, the average sale price. So we had these really cool things we could do. The problem is it didn't scale. I could do rooms. At HP, we did 7,500 people in a room. So I could do big rooms, but how do you get people to change beliefs and behaviors? So when I partnered with Salesforce and HP, I met a man named Frank Rouse, who just also retired. Seems like I'm the only guy working these days, but that's okay. It's a get to. And Frank gave me a business problem. And he said, Barry, we've watched you grow our direct sales fabulously. Your training program, the pilot produced $132 million in revenue. That was a pilot. He said, it's fabulous. But I have a business problem for you that if you could figure out, I will pay you a lot of money. But you have to promise me, and you have to prove it to me, and you have to de-risk it to HP. And I'm like, what do you got, Frank? You had me at hello. This is at the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay. He said, I need you to get the results you are getting with your in-person direct sales organization training. I need that to scale across our partner channel, 10,000 people, hundreds of partners.
With different incentives. Yeah, they're all in their, like, they're all doing their own thing. They're worried about their own business. They're not under the corporate umbrella per se.
And very astute.
Yeah.
Now, he said, if you could do that, not only will you have done something no one has ever figured out, I will fund it, but I won't fund it up front. So you got to prove it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, you had me on a rope.
Challenge accepted.
It was. And it took us about 6 months, and we cracked that code. And so we did something, and we rolled out Selling Through Curiosity in an on-demand format with role plays, skill set, belief and behavioral change work, customized tools that anybody could facilitate. And let me just say that again. Anybody could facilitate. I didn't say a professionally trained trainer. I mean, if you could push play and pause and let people read the screen and read what's there, you could literally facilitate our full program and materially change a company's revenue. And the metrics, and we did, we cracked that code. That was the precursor for figuring out now where else can we do that? And so what was really cool is we've had a stadium of people, 20,000 people, and we've had people stand up, let's role play. So for us, the pedagogy, the way in which we train and the way in which people consume information from a learning standpoint, the pedagogy is the magic. The location, that has no bearing. So we could do a stadium, and when we go to say, okay, guys, it's time for a group discussion, we have everybody stand up, get yourself into groups of 6 or 7 or 8. The questions are up on the big screen, go. When we say this is the role play, we teach them the role play. They have their materials on their phone. They pull it up. There's the role play. They can see the instructions. They get into groups. We move them around. It's magic. And so now when you think about what we're doing right here, this is a podcast. It's you and me and people listening. But there's no interaction. If you think about it, people are just learning from our stories and learning, and they're each person's taking away or not, whatever information they want to. What the code that we cracked was, and this is when there was no Zoom, there was no pandemic. This is in 2010, 2011. WebEx had come out with a product that you could have audio breakout rooms. So if you imagine a group of 200 people in a training, they're seeing me. No one has a camera, just me. They're listening to me, and then they have a manual. I explain the exercise. They look at my screen, and then I say, we're now going to send you to your own conference calls, and you're going to role play. Here's what it's going to look and sound like. And we would show them a little video. At that point, it took 3 people to coordinate behind the scenes to seamlessly send them to breakout rooms. They would have their experience. We could communicate with them, and then we would bring them back. We were using the equivalent of Zoom breakout rooms and using technology before it had ever been invented. I was in the days where people said, there's no way you can do training virtually. People aren't going to learn anything. They're going to be doing their own thing. And we're like, but what if there was a way?
You've seen a lot in Silicon Valley, right? Of like making something that didn't exist to exist.
Yeah, vaporware is pretty common. And
Shelfware, vaporware, you made it real. Yeah.
We made it real. And so and then once Zoom came along, and we had a great story with WebEx, the WebEx product actually didn't work, and I could get no traction with their engineering, and I couldn't escalate. And I finally reached out to my buddy at Salesforce and said, hey, do you know Doug, the CEO, the president at WebEx? He's like, yeah. I go, would you set an appointment for me? He goes, yeah, why? I got to give him $250,000 gift because their product, I want to build a business on it, but it doesn't work. And he's like, right. Sure. So I went and met Doug, and we had this great conversation. I said, I'm going to customize a training program. I'm going to give it to you for free. Jim pays $250,000 every time I do it. And I need to show you that your product doesn't work. And he goes, our product works great. I go, I know you believe that. But what if it turned out it didn't? And he's like, I'm all in. Let's do it. So we did it. We broke it the very first time. Once it was broke, then it got traction to get fixed, which it did. And I used that product until Zoom came out, and then Zoom developed in its maturity. Now you can have 100 breakout rooms. So we'll do a Zoom with 1,000 people, 100 breakout rooms, sending people to events. And then you can link, the technology allows you to link things together. So from a scale standpoint, we just cracked some codes I'm really proud of.
That's cool. Barry, so we're almost wrapped up here. So let's talk about two things. One is what you're excited about now and going forward. And then I'm also curious, who do you get inspired by?
I get inspired by my wife. I met my wife at a car wash. I had a fear to introduce myself to beautiful women, and I just went. I just had to overcome that. Tony Robbins said, "If I can't, I must." And so I went up and introduced myself, and she was the nicest person I ever met. And today, I've been married 32 years. She's the nicest person I ever met, and I get inspired by her. What she brings: curiosity, no judgment, really some fundamental beliefs in parenting and friendship. That's her natural God-given gift. I bring that to the business. I struggled being a parent. I struggled being curious. I struggled not being righteous. I'm still to this day learning lessons from my wife. I get very much inspired by her. She just was this magical person when I met her. And to this day, we last night we had conversations sitting and watching this TV show we're into, and we got off on this tangent, hit pause and got off on this tangent about raising kids and looking back and what would we have done differently and how could we have, maybe applied things differently. And most of the time it's me having to learn to apply things differently because I just had to undo a lot of bad habits that she had. So she really inspired me. And the lessons I've learned from people, there's motivation. I think there's people that motivate you. And I think there's ways to get motivated. It's taking action that's the difference. And I think that's what I think most people misjudge motivation. And that is they'll listen to a motivational speaker, they'll get inspired, but there's no action.
Right.
And there's no action plan. And I think in today's society, there's a huge disconnect. We've never had a more lonely society. We've never had bigger disconnect in authentic connections. I think the pandemic wiped out a bunch of people. Society has really gotten away from connecting authentically, excuse me, and really learning how to connect human being to human being, how to go and be interested versus trying to be interesting. How do we do those things? And so for me, I get inspired by people that I can learn from and that those people that help me take action. I'm inspired by my best friend who I work out with on Zoom 3 days a week. Because he's like, no, dude, I just watched you cheat on that. You owe me 2 more. And because it's forcing action. And so that, to me, that's what gets me really excited is when I can meet people. Rob DeSantis is a great example. Rob sent me into different companies over the years. Yeah. And he's the most optimistic person on the planet. And then he would say, okay, how are you going to do things differently? What are you going to be doing? How are we going to change this? And it's all about specific change. I'm inspired by my co-professor at Stanford, who's now retired. What inspired me about Jim is He's an academic. That's all he's ever known. And he took what I brought in practical skills and made a commitment to apply it and learn it on his own as part of his own personal learning integrity. Gets me emotional. Huge. That's just huge value. So people that inspire me are those that take action. I would say to everybody ever listening to anything motivational, God bless you. Do something. Do something.
Nice. Do something. And it's the folks that are in your community, your one-to-one relationships are the folks that you're getting inspired from. I wasn't sure where you were going to go with it, so it was that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and we're getting inspired because we're having to learn about sales funnels and B2C and offering workshops and seminars to people on dating. So we're in the beginning stage of that. So I'm very much learning from those people, and it's been magical. My daughter Joey and I were just taking what we do in the B2B world and applying it to B2C. There is some interesting challenges of people taking action and being serious and accountability and having a commitment to action and being clear about their goals and why do they want to do things.
Wow, that's a new challenge to work on. So Barry, as we wrap up, I'm curious for the audience, but also for myself, where can they find your courses and content? And we have my wife Lindsay and I, we have a 5-month-old at home, so I'm interested in parenting through curiosity.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
The only thing better than that 5-year-old is when the 5-month-old is when you hold your grandbaby at 5 months.
Nice.
But that you have a little bit ways to go on that. So by the way, you can search Barry Rhein. You can search Selling Through Curiosity. We're now just opening up our social media. We're getting much more down the line. We've still been a little bit stealth mode on the Dating Through Curiosity. That will be announced here shortly, and then we'll have a separate Instagram channel. We do have on Instagram Through Curiosity, and so we do have and we post different applications of curiosity and how to apply that in Through Curiosity. And so I think it's through.curiosity, but you'll be able to find it.
Okay.
And we'd love to have them. And as people are thinking through, we have commercial programs available, but they're more for the traditional, not necessarily the non-traditional. So for those that want to get into sales and really want a career in that, Selling Through Curiosity is a great program. Do some research on it. There's some tools and stuff they can pull from that. So that would be my, how'd I do?
Yeah, that was great. And the Parenting Through Curiosity, is that available?
Work in progress, baby.
Okay.
No, you're going to have to suffer through many.
Okay.
Go and be curious. But that will be coming out. But right now we need to nail the Dating Through Curiosity. Joey and my daughter Joey, we have a vision of what are helping hundreds of millions of single people with the skills and confidence to find true love, to find their life partner, to authentically connect.
Hopefully your customer lifetime value won't be that high because it's one and done, right? If you do it right.
By the way, how cool is that? Now, here's the best part. Very astute again, Andrew. Yeah. The skills of selling yourself, the skills of genuine connection, the skills of that ongoing relationship also happen to apply in marriage, also happen to apply in all relationships. So the cool part is we expect to see that as we start thinking of relationships through curiosity. Down the road, it will be the next life cycle.
Customer success, and keeping it going. So
keeping it going.
All right. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Andrew, thank you. Thanks, everybody. God bless.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and also share it out on LinkedIn or with friends, colleagues, or classmates who might like the show as well. You can also get the newsletter at leaderlev.com/podcast. You can find that also in the show notes.